My name is David Dearman. I'm the head of school at Trinity Episcopal School, and I'm thankful that Pastor Robin asked me to help today while she needed to be away. Start off with an old story that's just made the rounds in the Episcopal Church for probably 40 years. There was a priest who was leaving the Episcopal Church Center in New York and then their own official business, running a little late and worried. So when he stepped into the cab, he asked the cab driver to step on him. He didn't want to miss his flight. And the cab driver did just that. Stepped on him. And man, that cab driver was just flying through the streets of New York. And so much so that the priest was holding his briefcase tight against his chest with his fingernails digging into the material on the outside of it, and he was grimacing as the cab driver was taking turns on what felt like two wheels. And the cabbie, made a small miscalculation, which ended up causing him to hit the curb and jump the curb, and actually to crash into the side of a building. And so the next thing you know, both the cab driver and the priest are standing at the pearly gates in front of St. Peter's, and St. Peter looked at the cab driver and said, here is your golden crown and your golden staff. And then came to the priest and said, well, here is your wooden crown and your wooden staff. And the priest was going, look, I'm grateful to be here. Don't get me wrong, but I sort of noticed that the cab driver's appointments were golden and that my staff and crown are wooden. What gives here? And St. Peter said, well, yes, salvation is through grace alone, but we do here in heaven pay attention to results. And it seems that when you preached, people's minds wandered and they occasionally lost consciousness. But when that cab driver drove, people prayed. So the theme in today's gospel reading is prayer. And we've been building up to this because, as you know, 2 weeks ago, we had the parable of the Good Samaritan, which was all about embodying love to neighbor and what that looks like, being active in the world of the gospel. And then last week we had the parable, or the story of Mary and Martha. And you'll remember that Martha was real busy in the kitchen preparing a meal, and Mary was out in the living room sitting at Jesus' feet just listening to him while Martha was on slow burn. Finally she goes into Jesus and says, ask my sister to get herself in the kitchen and help me instead of sitting around. Jesus says, no, I'm not going to ask her that, because she is sitting at my feet listening, being attentive, and that's the better part. We don't need all of the work that you're doing, and she's chosen the better part. I'm not going to take it away from her. And so that segues into today's reading, which is, instead of being out in the world doing all types of good work and so forth, it's more like being at the feet of Jesus. It's about prayer. It's about that time when we look inward, when we open our hearts to God, both corporately and individually, private. And as we know from the story of Mary and Martha, the primary thing is the prayer. The primary thing is opening our hearts to God. Yes, it is not meaningful without expressing love in the world, but the primary thing is prayer. It reminds me that, and this happens more and more as I get older, that sometimes I will be walking into a room knowing I have a purpose, but not really remember what it was I went into the room for. my life is like this. You're like, did I take that pill? Well, I think that it's sometimes helpful if you will return to the place you were when you were thinking about it. And often, if I will just go back to where I was and just wait a moment, it'll come back to me what my purpose was. Oh, that's what I was going to do. Prayer is like that. Without prayer, we can be actively involved in the world, doing all kinds of great things, but really not know why we're doing it. Prayer is the primary thing of the Christian life. And that's what this whole season of the season after Pentecost is like during this long summer. We look at the Christian life. And we've been through a whole series that points us toward prayer being central, prayer being primary. Jesus' followers, it appears, knew that Jesus was a person who talked to God. But they couldn't help but miss this. Not just in prayers in the synagogue, but he would go off by himself and he would talk to God privately. We know this because the disciples had to ask him, well, how do you pray? We heard John's disciples taught, we heard John taught his disciples how to pray. Would you teach us how to pray? And, Jesus doesn't immediately respond to everything. This time he does. Because prayer is primary. And he teaches them that when you pray, say this. And he starts everything with Father. Now, I got to tell you, if you're looking at the Lord's Prayer in Luke, you're probably going, that's an abbreviated version, must be. Because it's shorter than what we say liturgically. And if you want to find that one, closer to that one, then you go to Matthew's version. So in Luke, it's sort of pared down some. Luke's version might be a bit older. And Jesus starts the prayer with Father. So right off the bat, we are reminded and invited and asked to call Jesus Father. Not, oh, numinous over-spirit of the universe. Not, oh, ground of our being. But, Father. We are invited in prayer to act as if we were children of God. Powerful stuff. That we are connected through prayer to something that is greater than we are. We are invited through prayer to be a part of God's family. A family more numerous than the sands of the sea. A family that is forgiven, empowered, loved. And while there are different types of prayer, what starts with this word Father is a type of prayer that we call adoration. Father, hallowed is your name. I remember a song sung by Fran McKendry in which a young boy sort of wakes up from, he'd been in Sunday school class, but his head was on his desk and maybe he had drooled a little bit. And anyway, what he heard was, our Father Howard be your name. So he thought God's name was Howard for a little bit of his youthful life. But it is not Howard. We're not actually given God's name. That would be unseemly. We are, though, in this prayer, asked to say, Father, hallowed be your name. That's prayer. But it is simply adoration. It's like opening your heart to God. It's like wondering over the fabulousness of God. God is eternal. God is omniscient. God is creator of all that is. It's like, going into a national park where there are no lights and seeing the vast expanse of the heavens and trying to return to that childlike place when you first looked and saw the stars and maybe the band of the Milky Way and could just look and not imagine that there was ever a place that it would stop, and just getting this sort of feeling of infinity. It's just amazing. Infinity means no beginning, no end. And that, cats and dogs and squirrels, they don't think about timelessness or infinity. God has created human beings who have the capacity to envision, to imagine the infinite. What is 1 divided by 0? So that we have this capacity to be able to stand in awe of God. We've been created in order to pray in adoration of the one who created us. And perhaps among creatures, the only ones who are able to do so, we're invited to do that in prayer. And that starts off the whole Lord's Prayer. And in the rest of the prayer that Jesus has for us in the Gospel according to Luke, we are invited to pray for that which we need. And right off the bat, thy kingdom come. We live in a world today where every week seems like it's bringing some new type of violence. And that there are places and times where it seems like the world's kind of spinning apart. And that, hate gets organized and manifested. And we don't know what to do. And we're reminded in this series of readings that Christians are called to pray. There are other things, but what's primary? Prayer. Thy kingdom come. The world, something's wrong with it. It's not the way it was created to be. And we know that God's kingdom, we've had hints of it in power and beginning through the life, death, and resurrection of Jesus of Nazareth. It's started, but not in its fullness, not in its completeness. We don't have the lamb laying down with the lion and people taking their arms and beating them into plowshares. We're not there. Thy kingdom come. It's praying for peace is what it is. The peaceable kingdom of God. Thy kingdom come. We need this. We need day-to-day things. Our daily bread. We need forgiveness. We're walking around with all kinds of baggage. We need to be able to let go. We need to forgive and to be forgiven. We are invited to make our needs known to God. Jesus continues in his teaching on prayer to remind us to be persistent. Prayer is a way of life. Pray for peace. Doesn't look like it's happening. Keep praying for peace. It didn't happen again. Still pray for peace. Pray with persistence. It is a character trait to be able to have a stick-to-itiveness, to not give up easily, to persevere. If I had to wish one character trait, that would be strong in every one of the children with whom I work, it's perseverance. Hang in there. If you have a dream, don't give up on it. I remember when my oldest son, he graduated from Ball High School on the island, thought he was like the smartest thing since sliced bread. And he was good at math, and he liked to fly paper airplanes as a child. So of course, he went into aerospace engineering at the Cockrell School of Engineering at UT, and when he went through those doors, it was like he was nothing special. Here he was with all these brilliant people, and the first semester, one of the core engineering classes. I think all engineers take the same set of classes. One of those core classes, he failed it, just F. And he was shocked. He was scandalized. I don't think he ever made anything lower than a B or something like that. Just wasn't him. And he had this crisis inside. Do I do something easier? He finally, after looking back, he stayed with it. He took the class again and passed it. And today he's doing what he loves to do. Because he persevered. Because he didn't give up so easily. He had a dream. He had something that had captured his imagination. He had something that he believed that he could contribute. And instead of just giving that up, because the first time he ran into a roadblock or came into some trouble, nope. He took the class again. That's what I hope for the kids that I work with at my school, because I know it's coming. Because it's happened to all of us. We're going to run into roadblocks. We're going to stumble. There's going to be things in our lives that don't turn out the way that we wanted them to be. But if we remember that we're loved, if we remember who we are, and if we have a good sense of our gifts and what we want to do, we're asked to persevere. Jesus today calls for us to persevere in our prayer. To remember who we are. To remember the primacy of prayer. And not to give up on it easily when things don't look like they're going the way we think we want them to. Adore God. Pray for peace in God's kingdom. Pray for the things that we need. Pray for forgiveness. Forgive others. In this season where we talk about the Christian life, we are asked to remember, finally, that God loves us. And God, in this reading, we're supposed to compare this to a parent. If your child asks you, for an egg, you're probably not going to give them a deadly arthropod. How much more if we ask God for the things that we need, will God not be harmful to us? How much more loving is God than a fallible earthly parent? It all boils down to trust. As Christians, we are asked to bet our lives on God. And in so doing, to receive our lives back. And to no longer just be related to our relatives, but to be children of the living God. Amen.
Amen.